Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Sumukascha Yekadantascha Kapilo Gajakarnakaha Lambodharascha Vikato Vignarajo Vinayakaha Dhumaketur Ganadhyakshaha Palachandro Gajananaha Vakratundaha Surpakarno Herambaha Skandapurvajaha Paradharam Vishnum Sasivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vignopasantaye Yasyat Viradavaktraadhya Parishadhya Parasatam Vignam Nighnanti Satatam Vishvaksenam Tamasraye Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheswaraha Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. With Bhagavan grace, let us continue from where we left off. Athato bhaktim vyakyasyamaha. Right? Now, the next sutram is Sa Tvasmin Parama Prema Rupa. Parama Prema Rupa. The words as we covered earlier, Sa, Tu, Asmin, Parama Prema Rupa. The very first word Sa. Sa means that. But not just a regular that. Even when we talk among ourselves, when we are describing something, that the speaker knows, that the listener also knows something about it, as opposed to introducing something that's an unknown. And that's what it denotes, because you and I and everybody know what bhakti is. And Narada is not teaching us what bhakti is. He is giving us a divine commentary so we don't go astray. We all have an idea in our own mind what bhakti is, right? And so that's why he uses the word Sa. And very interestingly, talking about it, let us see what some of the other elders have said what they think bhakti is. Even though you or I or anybody else really do not need to take somebody else's definition of what bhakti is, somebody else's experience of what bhakti is. They are describing their experiences. But we must have our own experience, the love for God and the love of God. That is what both are really bhakti. Prahlada, Uddhava and Narada, they declare that bhakti is a loving sense of possession, a feeling that the Lord is one's own. This is a very interesting experience of what Prahlada and Uddhava and Narada talk about it. This is given in Narada Pancharatra. That is the scripture from which that is given. Now, when there are different stages, the love for God manifests itself in so many ways and so beautifully. First, you think that God is mine. I possess Him. He is mine because you are so attached to Him. And you cannot be separate from Him. This question of owning God first happens, definitely. Then you go to a stage where first you say, Swami, you belong to me. And then you say, Swami, I belong to you. That comes after that. And then, of course, the final stage is when Swami, you and I are one. That experience finally comes. So that is one experience of Prahlada, Uddhava, and Narada. And so what is called bhakti, they say, is nothing but the enjoyment of Bhagavan, who is the master of all our senses. But after purifying our senses beautifully ourselves, which means the mind is pure, then mind gets pure when it thinks of Bhagavan. The more it thinks of Bhagavan, the more pure it becomes. And in loving God, you don't put any conditions. There's no precondition, there's no condition, there is no stipulation. You just love Him because that's the nature of love. Love is because that is what it is. It knows no season, it knows no reason. It has no reason. Its nature is to love. And it just expands and expands and expands. And that's the nature of it. Then, we want to do very worshipful service to Bhagavan. And with our mind thinking of Him. Mam Anusmaran is as Bhagavan says in Tasmas Sarve Kaleshu Mam Anusmara Yudhya Sha is what Bhagavan says, right? In Bhagavad Gita. Now, so we do the service, worshipful to Him. That's also bhakti. The constant flow of mind and brimming with love towards Bhagavan without any selfish desire. That is bhakti. And Bhagavan is attracted by it. Is what Narada Panchasastra says. And let me give you the title properly. The Narada Pancharatra is the name of the title. Then, continuing on, we have lots of sensual pleasures. So we know what a pleasure is like, even though those are all temporary and they really bring misery in their wake. We all know that. But there is a certain fondness, certain liking for among people who really do not use their buddhi and discriminate, so they go after sense pleasure. And the same impulse and the compulsion I have, even though I don't use my buddhi, what is attracting me to the sensual pleasures, if I just look at it that way, and direct that impulse and compulsion to Bhagavan, then that becomes bhakti also. And it is like we say, I love something. I love my car, love my child, love my husband, whatever we say, right? And because of that, the Bhagavan becomes the object of my love. Then that's the reason the rishis got the name, in English speaking, lover, because they love Bhagavan. Then Manavala Bhamani says, very loving contemplation of Krishna without any break. Without any break. This is so important. About Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan also says the same thing, without break. Sasvatam is the word that Bhagavan uses and in describing this. So without any break, very lovingly thinking of Bhagavan, without any motive also. There is no desire to gain something out of it. It is not a vyaparam. It is not a business transaction. You just love Him for love's sake, nothing else. And you're not worried about scholarship. You're not thinking of work to do, whatever. Those are all immaterial, irrelevant. Okay? You're not thinking about ignorance. You're not thinking about knowledge. None of those. Just love Bhagavan for Bhagavan's sake, without anything else. That is the highest bhakti, is what Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu talks about. Then, when we choose our favorite form of God, favorite idol, whatever form that individually we like, that's what's so great about the pathways to God. You select whichever one you want, and then that natural affection we have, whether it is Krishna or Rama or Balaji or Mahalakshmi or Pullayar, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, that natural affection itself will mature into extreme love. Then, at that stage, the mind is absorbed, even though it may be the form, that's okay, but it's so much absorbed in it, and that becomes bhakti and becomes in its essence of prema, love, that becomes bhakti. Then Bhakti Rasayana says, what is called bhakti is a state of mind in which, being melted by the force of spiritual discipline, the mind constantly flows towards Bhagavan. There are so many ways. I may take a spiritual undertaking right this minute. I'm going to control my senses. I'm going to control my desires. I'm going to exercise my mind to control my senses instead of following it. So whatever, or I want to become less selfish and more selfless, or I will speak sweetly, whatever you want to discipline that you undertake. And as a result of that spiritual discipline, the mind starts flowing towards Bhagavan. And that becomes bhakti according to Bhakti Rasayana. Then some say, as in Viveka Chudamani, it says bhakti is something where you ceaselessly, without stopping, continue to search for oneness with your own self, with your own Atma, with your own conscience, with your own awareness, the entity that you know you really are, and searching for it and trying to become one with it. That inquiry, that process is also bhakti. And when you inquire into the truth of your own self, that's what Viveka Chudamani says. Then Yamunacharya says a beautiful thing. He says, when we have the darshan of Bhagavan, Avatara Purushan, that's okay. That's also fine, because when you see a darshan of Avatara Purushan, there's nothing but the divinity itself that you see, depending on the vision that Avataram chooses to grant you. That vision of divinity, Yamunacharya says, is Parabhakti. Then, becoming one with that vision, without any feeling of separation, that becomes Parajnana. And then, once you taste it, and once you also realize the bliss, tasted it, that knowledge is there with you. It's not fully complete yet. Therefore, there is some anxiety, because the feeling of separation is still there. So as long as the feeling and experience of separation is there, there will always be anxiety. So you're anxious, and you want to make sure that this Parabhakti and Parajnana, this thing that you experience, always stays there, doesn't leave you. That anxiety to maintain that oneness with divinity, he says, is Parama Bhakti. Even though later on we'll talk about Narada himself will say the example of Bhakti is really Gopis Bhakti, and that is Parabhakti, is what he himself will say. So these are all the way that different elders have talked about. And in Bhagavatam, that describes Bhakti as you hear the qualities, the stories and glories of Bhagavan. Then what happens? The mind automatically flows towards him. Automatically. You don't have to do anything at all. All you have to do is to just listen. Even involuntarily, even hesitantly, even you may not want to do it. Just hear it. Those sweetness and the beauty of the stories and the glories of Bhagavan will automatically make your mind float towards him. And what happened? When it floats toward Bhagavan, who is nothing but the repository of all good, then as the mind flows unbroken, continuously towards him, just like Ganga flows into the sea without a stop, the Bhakti Margam, Bhakti dawns and starts ripening and maturing and all that. And that Bhakti is beyond all the gunas. It is the unconditioned and unthwarted, without obstacles, no conditions, no obstacles in it, just flows. Just like the way Ganga flows towards the ocean, flows. That love for the Supreme Person is Bhakti. And from Bhakti only we get Mukti, we get relief. So, the Sa to Asmin Parama Prema Rupa. That Sa really indicates the subject matter that everybody knows about. But they experience it differently. The listener, you know about it. I know about it. Everybody knows what bhakti is. So he says, uses the word sa instead of saying tat. Tat means that. Sa also means that bhakti, but here it means something that you also know about it. Right? So two, what is it? Asmin means in this divinity, in this Bhagavan. And Parama Prema Rupa. This bhakti is nothing but the form of love to Bhagavan. Asmin Parama Prema Rupa. What is the form of bhakti? It is nothing but love. To what? To Asmin. Asmin means here Bhagavan. That's what the second sutram says. So what are the characteristics, Swami? Parama Prema, we have prema, right? And we experience prema all the time. The prema is the one that is keeping us alive, making us move and all these things, right? But we never pay attention to it. We never pay the right acknowledgement, to where all this comes from. But still, the Parama Prema is still there. The Parama is supreme, very important. The supreme. It's not the type of prema that we enjoy and give and take in this world. No. It is not at all that. It is very different from that. Even though it's a part of it. What we enjoy in life is a part of the Parama Prema, but the prema that we experience and give and take is not the Parama Prema. The Parama Prema has got three main characteristics. One is, it has no feeling of ahamkaram. Remember that. Ahamkaram. I am the doer. In English, we have a tendency to say ego. Right? Immediately we think we understand. Ego means a couple of things. One is, ego can also mean pride. Right? That's another connotation for the English word ego. But Sanskritam, it says very specifically, ahamkaram. Very important. Okay? And the word for pride in Sanskrit is madam. That is different. So ahamkaram, I am the doer, I am speaking right now, I am hearing, I am this, I am that, right? I am so and so, I have all this. All these feelings that we have, that awareness, sense of awareness, that ahamkaram, that will be completely absent in Parama Prema, love for God. Second, it has no selfishness, sans selfishness. And every one of us, at least at one point or another in our life, will experience this taste of selfless, supreme love. That's what each one of us are. And then that momentarily we will experience that supreme bliss and peace that comes with it. Then we go back and get mired into our normal thing. But this is a blessing from Bhagavan. Happens to every one of us. So that is point one. Absence of ahamkaram and absence of selfishness. Then, number two. What's the second characteristic of Parama Prema? The moment I start loving God for love's sake, for God's sake, nothing expected, nothing wanted, nothing desired, no conditions and no obstacles. Just love Him and start enjoying. Be in that experience. What happens? The second characteristic automatically takes place. And that is, really, you don't have place in your heart for other things. They don't matter to you. They become irrelevant. You see the relevance in the scheme of things, the way things are happening, but they don't matter to you. Right? Then, third characteristic is, when you love Bhagavan, you actually forget yourself. That's what happened to gopis. We all know that's what happened to Radha. That's what happened to Meera. Right? And that's what happened to Tyagaraja. So many, you look at any devotee, or Tirupanarvar, you name Tulasidas, Surdas, it doesn't matter, Chaitanya, any devotee that you can think of, they all would forget themselves that I am so and so. That feeling is completely gone. So these are three main characteristics of Parama Prema Rupa. So, as we discussed, if this is the Rupam of Parama Prema, the form of Parama Prema is Bhakti. Oh, then Swami, what is the Bhavam we talked about it? Like the Bhavam, what is the experience that happens? Rupam is form. What is the experience, the Bhavam of this Bhakti, this love? That is nothing but peace. And peace is bliss. When you love someone, not yourself. No. Not that selfishness has to go. Sooner or later, it must go and it will disappear. But when you love someone for that someone else's sake, nothing to do with you, then what do you experience at that moment? Is it nothing but peace? And that peace is bliss. And that bliss is Bhagavan. Anando Brahma is what Taittiriya Upanishad says. Now, there is a beautiful discussion between Hanuman and Sri Ramachandra. Hanuman tells Rama, Swami, when I think I am this body, then I am your servant, Swami. Dasoham Kosalendrasya is what he said. Dasoham, I am a servant. Swami, I think of myself as Hanuman. I think I am this body. I consider myself as your servant. But, Swami, when I think of myself as a Jivatma, as the life force and the soul, then I know I am part of you. But then, Swami, when I realize that I am that soul, I am that Atma, then Swami, you and I are one. This is what Hanuman tells Ramachandra. And it's a very, very beautiful expression and experience. So I'm going to share that in Sanskritam with you. Deha buddhyatu dasoham jiva buddhyatu adam shakaha atma buddhyatu tvameva aham iti me nishtita matihi is what he says. So going to the next sutra, sutram number 3. Amritasva rupacha parama prema rupam, which is the love for God is parama prema. It is also amritasva rupa. It is a form of amritatvam, amrita. Swami, what is amrita? Immediately we think immortality, right? No death. Death from what? Death means there is birth. There is no death, no birth. So love has no birth, no death. So that is what love really is. That's what really Parama Prema is. But death from what? Birth from what? So there's no change. So when you experience Bhagavan and when that you really love Bhagavan for Bhagavan's sake, that experience is permanent. It doesn't decrease. And actually, the more and more you recall and relive that experience, that becomes sweeter and sweeter. But the sweetness of it never decreases. It never goes away. That Amrita feeling, that immortality, number one. Then number 2, can I really become immortal in this body? The body has got to go one day. It's not permanent. Mind has to also end. Yes, very much so. But as Ramana Maharshi did, as Ramakrishna Paramahamsa did, as those of you who know Purusha Suktam, it's given several parts of the Vedas, but I'll just say one part from Purusha Suktam, which some of you have learned. Tamevam vidvan amrita iha bhavati. Iha, here, bhavati, he becomes amrita, immortal. Okay, vidvan, who has experienced and attained union, oneness in the mind. Once the mind goes away, only the heart lives. The body does its function and then that goes away. That is immaterial. But the amritatvam, tamevam vidvan amrita iha bhavati. Okay, we know that. And several other parts of Vedangal Upanishadam, it's also said the same thing. So that is one understanding of Amrita. Amritasva rupacha. How else can it be? Amritam also means sweetness. Sweetness. It's not the sweetness that we are aware of, that we taste with our tongue, for example, or the sweetness of music that we taste with our ears, or the sweetness of a fragrance that we taste with our nose, or the sweetness of a beautiful scenery. Could be a sunset, sunrise, or a nature, stream flowing very pleasantly. So beautiful. So many things of beauty are there in this creation. And we see it, the eyes enjoy it, that taste, that sweetness of that taste. No, this is not that. This is a sweetness that is beyond what the senses can experience. Amritam. And that sweetness never leaves you. Once you taste it, you're hooked. You're attached to it forever. That Amritam is another meaning. And we talked about the moksha and liberation. And Amritam also means the freedom, the liberation. One is the immortality, then the sweetness, then having that Amritatvam right here while you've got this body. Yes, it's very much possible, very doable. You don't have to think of Bhagavan and leave your last breath, or say Omkaram when you leave your last breath. Yes, those are also there. But as you breathe and live in this body, it is possible to attain Amritatvam through Para, Prema, Bhakti, through love to Bhagavan. Whatever way you want to love him. We saw so many people who have got different experiences. You have your own experience. Bhagavan will respond. What is important is to touch him, whichever way you want. And that touching, that sincere desire, that is Bhakti. That is the relationship between you and Bhagavan. That is Bhakti. And Bhagavan responds. Immediately he will respond. Not even an iota of delay is there. So, then where does the moksha come from? Where does the liberation come from? From birth and death and all that. Very important to understand. Once, as Bhagavan says in Bhagavad Gita, in Akshara Brahma Yoga, you can see this very, very beautifully. He says, those who have reached me do not take birth again. He says that. Even you achieve Sathya Lokam, the Lokam of Brahma, you still have to be born after some time. Whereas, you reach me, there is no more birth for you. That means there are 4 types of births. 3 births are karma bound or time bound. There is no escape. There is no freedom. You have to be born. And in order to carry out whatever the remaining part of the residue is. But the 4th type of birth is a free birth, which the Bhagavan, the love, the prema, the bliss, the anandam, whatever you want to call it, that thing, the entity that exists, chooses to take a birth of its own at a time and place that it decides. And then it chooses to leave the body at a time and place it decides in order to spread love among people. to show them how to live in a loving manner. That's a free birth. That is what you get. So immortality. So your moksham, liberation from that birth death cycle. Really. So we saw a few, and all this happens when bhakti, love for God, takes place. I love so many. Just sit back and think, what are the things I love so much? Why don't I love God? The moment you start loving God, slowly all these, no, not necessarily slowly, but all these things start take place. There is one more meaning of the word amrita. What is that? It means yajna sesha. Yajna sesha is another meaning of amrita. What does yajna sesha mean? Yajnam we say in very crude English as sacrifice. But what is it really? If I do everything as offering to Bhagavan only, with that thought of Bhagavan in my mind, and the action I am doing, and whatever I am offering, everything, whatever I think I offer it to Bhagavan, what remains? The remaining, the residue is nothing but peace, bliss, and nothing but love. That residue itself, as we practice this bhakti yogam, that is also amritam. So, amritasya rupacha. Next slokam we will read and then take it up with Bhagavan's grace tomorrow. Yal labdva puman siddho bhavati amruto bhavati tripto bhavati. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Samastalokaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Samastalokaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Samastalokaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om.